Welcome to Let's Talk Memoir, a podcast for memoir lovers, readers, and writers. I'm your host, Ronit Plank. Let's Talk Memoir is also a Substack newsletter. About once a month, I publish memoir craft advice, answer questions about memoir writing, and share my latest classes and upcoming events. You can go to substack.com and subscribe to Let's Talk Memoir for free. You can also find me, Ronit, on Instagram and on Blue Sky. It's not too early to begin carving out some time for your memoir project this fall. If you've been thinking you might want an in-person writing workshop, my upcoming offering at the Larry McMurtry Center might be just the one for you. Writing dynamic memoir from lived experience to gripping story will be held from September 30th to October 4th in Archer City, Texas. By workshop's end, you will better understand memoir as a genre and how it differs from autobiography. You'll be able to identify and utilize the voice of both your narrator I and character I. You'll be able to strengthen tension and stakes in your memoir, create an outline of your memoir's narrative arc, hone in on what remains unsolved in you to deepen the resonance of your story. You'll be able to experiment with a variety of structures for your memoir project, develop plans for a writing life that nurtures both your creative and publishing goals, and begin to build community with other memoirists. Archer City will be our home for the 5 days, and fun facts about Archer City, it's the hometown of Larry McMurtry, the award-winning writer, and movies based on his novels The Last Picture Show and Texasville were filmed in Archer City. Angela Kinsey of The Office, who I used to do improvisation with in Los Angeles, is also from Archer City, and possibly even more important, there is a Dairy Queen there, and I would like to go there with you. So if this workshop is starting to sound appealing, you can check out the link for more information and registration in the show notes for this episode. You can also visit ronitplank.com and check out my events page. And if you have questions about what we'll be doing and whether or not this is a good fit, you can always message me via Substack or Instagram. And now, on to this week's episode. Today, my guest is Deborah K. whose first book is the novel So Happy Together, which came out in 2021 when she was 74. Her essays have appeared in Oldster Magazine, Motherwell, Herstory, In Short Journal, Fauxmoir, Eat, Darling, Eat, and more. She earned a Master of Social Worker degree in 1992 and spent much of her career focused on the prevention of domestic violence and sexual assault and the provision of services to survivors. The mother of two and grandmother of two, Deborah lives in Maine with one husband and one sweet, jaunty rescue dog. Her memoir, An Old Man's Darling, about her age gap first marriage, is out now from Heliotrope Books. Welcome, Deborah.
Thank you, Ronit. So nice to be here.
I'm so happy that you're here, and I would love for you to begin by sharing a bit about An Old Man's Darling.
Right. Well, as you said, it's about my age gap first marriage. In 1968, I dropped out of college before my senior year, not the wisest choice in the world, and went to New York and ran out of money. So I had to get a job. I was kind of living a little hippie life and ran out of money. So I got a job in a corporate management consulting firm where I met Bill Shepard, who was one of those old businessmen the first couple of days until he kind of stood out from the crowd. And that we had a fling is probably not surprising for the late 60s. But the fact that we lasted for 20 years, had 2 children, got married, renovated a house, had a life together is surprising. And that's what I write about. And then looking at it 50 years back, all the changes that have happened in terms of attitudes and mores and things like that. So I incorporate that into the novel, into the memoir. Sorry, it is true.
Well, how do you see the you who first fell in love with Bill?
Oh, I feel so protective and tender towards her. She really was a lost girl. She had lost her father 2 years before. I had lost my father 2 years before. I made some really kind of dumb decisions and got involved with some questionable people, took this job, and also the fact that I was feeling very unloved. I had lost the one person I thought who really loved me. And then this guy comes along, and after a while, he fell in love with me. And that was like turning my very flat life into something magical. And then just looking back 50 years, and I just feel like, oh, I just want to wrap her up, and give her a hug.
Would you have told her, "Stop, don't do that"?
That's moot right now. But
Yeah.
you know what? There's a part in the book where I say, when I see couples now who were like us, I have different kinds of impetus, like, oh no, stop, don't, or cherish this time. It's not going to be forever. So my relationship, as I wrote the book, it's both and. It's both the love story of my youth, and there is this power imbalance. So no, I have these great kids. So
Yeah,
no,
of
maybe it
course.
shouldn't
No,
anything.
but it is true. I think it's really important to set it in time and the generation and the era you were growing up. And really, there was so much. I mean, I wasn't there, but I know from TV and movies and literature how often those kinds of affairs and dalliances happened. Because the way that the adultery in the book is handled, this was your reality with him. This was the object of your affection, and he did whatever he could to be with you, though he was married and had a grown son. And so it's an interesting thing as a reader to root for you and want you to be happy, you, the memoirist, but also know that there's this whole other life that he's not being truthful about,
Right.
or vice versa. So, what was it like for you to go back and write about these early years when you had to hide your relationship?
That's really interesting because when I was in the beginning of the relationship, in a way, the secrecy was very titillating and sexy. And I mean, he was risking so much for me, right? But when I went back and wrote about it, I realized, oh, you know what? I was risking, and nobody was taking into account that I was taking such a huge risk. And I just was kind of like, oh my God, really?
Right. Because what do you think could have happened if you'd been found, if you'd been discovered?
There's a part in the book where I say, "What would have happened?" Because we used to write we were like high school
Yeah,
kids. We used to
lots of
write each other,
letters, which you include in the
well,
book.
the
Yeah.
letters, but also we used to write each other little notes. I mean, I worked in the same company, right? I was a very low level. And I thought, what if I had dropped one of those notes? We used to stick notes in the New York Times and things like that. And
I know it was a whole nother life, right? It was a whole life below the surface.
of course, what if the president of the company had walked along and said, "What's that post-it thing written in purple ink with hearts all over it?
Yeah.
What's that doing?" And then reading it, and I went, what would Bill have done? Would he have said, "Oh, she's delusional," or something like that? Or would he have risen to the occasion and protected me? It's mind boggling at this point that we even thought we could get away with it.
Yeah, but you did for a long time, I think, as far as I can tell. I mean, it seems like some of the people in the office knew about it and they disclosed some of their knowledge of it on a trip when you're away, but you did seem to get away with a lot. And when you were writing about these years, the beginning of the relationship, what did it feel like for you as the memoirist to go back and put this on the page?
Well, first of all, I was never going to write this book. I was never going to write this book
Because,
because I have kids. I couldn't even fathom doing it. But when we were at the beginning of the relationship, Bill wanted to write a book. He wanted us to write it together. He wanted to call it Wonder because everything was so wonderful and it would have been a very one note book if we'd written it at the time. But the way that I started writing it is that I was vacuuming, which is not something I do often, but I moved a suitcase in the front hall. It was very heavy. And for some reason, I hadn't opened it in a long time, I guess. I opened it and out poured these love letters. So, of course, I had to read them. And I was staying up nights. I was reading them. There were hundreds, I mean, hundreds. The year that we were apart, when I went back to school, he wrote once or twice a day. We wrote back and forth. I was just so taken with it and so back in that. But then as I was reading them, I was reading like 10 or 20 a night. And as I was reading them, I suddenly had this glimmer of, oh, wait a minute, that's not all there was. And it was quite revelatory for me. And so then I knew I had to write the book because I had to get that both and in there.
Ah, yeah. Well, then what did you discover about your story as you revised the manuscript? What was fresh for you that you hadn't really thought about or put into words before?
Well, it had a lot to do with how women were seen, how younger women and older men. As I said, he was putting so much of his life at risk. I realized I was too. And I think just looking back through everything that's happened over the past 50 years, the power differential, the Me Too. I wasn't underage, but I was just a couple of years out of adolescence. I was 21. I really had to reckon with that. I asked a lot of questions, both of myself and on the page. I think I'm just comfortable now living in that gray area. Yes,
Yeah.
that was eye opening for me.
Yeah, it's interesting because when it was happening, I'm imagining there was sort of this sense of fantasy and excitement and romance. And that was probably very intriguing. And in one aspect, you could see that as one note. And then later, when the marriage isn't going well, then you see it in this other way, this other version of it, which is things are bad, all is lost. But then you get to write the book, which incorporates all of these elements and more and give it the nuance that maybe you didn't have back then.
Right, exactly.
Yeah. Well, I was wondering if you would be willing to read from the prologue.
Sure.
Yeah. And I think the whole prologue would be great because this is how you open the book.
Right. Now, in a lot of the book, I quote his letters, but I also talk to Bill in my head. The beginning of this prologue is in italics because I'm talking to Bill. If I could go back, it wouldn't be to the beginning, although I bet you would, that lust fueled, late in your life, last chance, risk everything shocker of a love affair that started our story. No, I'm more drawn to the middle. To get the kids out of bed in the morning, throw a little laundry in the washer before work, walk the dog, have dinner on the table at 6, occasionally glorious, but mostly quite ordinary days that now seem sacred. Those were our best times. I wish I'd known it then. Hillsdale, New York, 1982. The house lights have dimmed, and a single spotlight comes up to illuminate an empty stool, stage left, in front of the proscenium. A man ambles over to the stool, but doesn't sit, more like perches on the edge. He looks to be about 70, is tall and lean, and his face has the time-chiseled features of someone who's never carried an ounce of fat on his bones. He has a pipe clenched in his teeth, but it isn't lit, fire regulations. He's wearing a fedora pushed back on his head and an unfashionably skinny tie under his vest, way before this throwback look was discovered by hipsters. His costume comes from his own closet. He waits to speak until latecomers have been seated and the audience settles down, then removes the pipe from his mouth and puts it in his pocket. This play is called Our Town. It was written by Thornton Wilder. The name of the town is Grover's Corners, New Hampshire, just across the Massachusetts line. His voice is sonorous but soothing and reaches to the back of the old Masonic Hall in this pastoral town in New York's Hudson Valley, also just across the Massachusetts line. There's a collective sigh when the man begins to speak, and audience members settle back into their hard wooden seats as his words transform a bare stage into a sleepy little New England burg circa 1901. The sky is beginning to show some streaks of light over in the east there. Along here's a row of stores, hitching posts and horse blocks in front of them. First automobile's going to come along in about 5 years. This is our doctor's house, Doc Gibbs. This is Mrs. Gibbs' garden. Corn, peas, beans, hollyhock, heliotrope. I'm waiting backstage for my imminent entrance as Mrs. Webb, the wife of the town's newspaper editor. And when the stage manager's voice rises and falls on the word heliotrope, I smile. I don't know why, but it sounds almost tender. I find out later it's Greek for a plant which turns its flowers toward the sun and signifies eternal love and devotion. I imagine the audience smiling too as they warm to their guide through this familiar territory. They know they'll be in good hands for the next 2 hours. I've been in those good hands for the past dozen years or so. The man is my husband, the father of my 2 children, and I'm filled with such love and pride, but also trepidation, as he begins to speak. We've lived in this community for a little over a year, in an even smaller town just up the road from the Masonic Hall, and I've worked at the local paper for most of that time. People recognize me. They've seen me at school board meetings. I take their pictures when they're celebrating their 50th anniversaries or the opening of deer season as they pose with their eviscerated 6-point bucks. I write a monthly column about the ups and downs of small town living. But most of them don't know Bill as my husband because he spends so much of his time engaged in renovating our 150-year-old house, and most of his interactions are with the guys at the lumber yard. we tend to keep to ourselves a lot. I'm not sure if this is because it's hard to find couple friends with interests in common, or because so much of our early relationship had to be carried out in secret. So this evening is, in a way, Bill's public debut, not just as an actor, but as my spouse, our coming out party. He is indeed nearing 70. He doesn't need any stage makeup to turn him older. I'm in my mid 30s, and our children are 5 and 8. When we're all on stage together and people we've never met check their programs and see we all have the same last name, the cat will be out of the bag. Which means I know many of our fellow townspeople, after first wondering if Bill is my father, will put two and two together and come up with something close to 34, which is the age difference between Bill and me. The four of us are taking part in this community theater production at my urging, something the family can do together that doesn't involve moving a metal thimble or a Scotty dog around a board and collecting $200 when we pass go. I'm playing the mother of Emily Webb, whose courtship, wedding, and untimely demise are depicted in 3 acts. Our son plays a newsboy and has worked hard at memorizing his lines, harder, in fact, than he's ever labored on his spelling words or math assignments. The play's director has cast our 5-year-old daughter in a non-speaking role as one of the residents of the cemetery in Act 3. Having her play a dead child gives me pause, but our little girl is thrilled to be an actress and sits very, very still on stage. Our town's 3rd act takes place 12 years after the first, in 1930, which is, coincidentally, the year of my husband's birth.
Thank you so much. When did you decide to put this as the prologue? When did you know this is how I'm going to begin the book? And what helped you make that structural decision?
Okay, well, I was going to start the book the way it started in life when I opened the suitcase and I found all these love letters and then something felt not right about just jumping right in there because I think that would have set the tone in a different way. Here's this fling, here's this love affair, older man, younger woman. And I really wanted to establish that we built a life together. So I thought about when we were all in our town together, and I thought that would make a perfect beginning, I think, because it showed us all being a family. And so I wrote the prologue, but I also liked the first chapter that I wrote, which was about finding the letters. And I was working with a developmental editor, and she was very big on structure, rightly so. And she said, nope, you can either have the prologue or you can have the first chapter because readers are going to just get bored. They want to go right into the action. I don't even like prologue, she said. But I held my ground. And she, at this point now, says, you know what? Spoiler alert, she was right. So I just feel really good about going from family life into the beginnings and then jumping into the action.
Yeah, I think what you're saying also makes me think a little bit about how if you started with the letters, we don't really know him, we don't really know you, and there's more of a chance that the reader could feel a little bit like othering this older man, right? Versus the coziness and the familiarity that
Right,
you introduce us to in the beginning of the prologue. So we see the cohesion, as you just said.
right,
You're a family first, not a spectacle,
right,
right?
right. Not a reality TV show.
Yes, and we also see that you have this memory of the four of you in this close and sentimental way. So when you think about, in addition to how you decided to start the book, how else do you feel like the book changed the most from conception to publication, or what was the biggest change in revision for you as a writer?
Right. I think when I started writing the book and the letters were the impetus, and it was this great love story of my youth, and I was writing the love story. And I think probably in the back of my head, I had Bill saying, oh, we need to write our story. This is so wondrous. We need to write our story. But as I was writing it, the real world intrudes, and you can't help but think about, wow, this is a little,
You're iffy on it, but what do
yeah.
you mean? Can you share
Yeah,
more?
sure, sure. So your listeners may not know this about me, but I was the director of first an organization of rape crisis centers and then a domestic violence organization. Now, there are things that we look for. In no way I want to imply any of that, but there are things like grooming and keeping things secret and being so special that you could also say, oh, well, this is about a love relationship, but there's also that little kind of ick
Hmm.
factor, right? That I really had to strike a balance in there because it would be naive of me to just write this love story and not recognize that this is the world we live in now.
So when you say you had to recognize that, you tried to involve maybe the narrator you in remarking or understanding this in time and space now and give it some perspective.
Right. From looking back from not only time and space, but my age now.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. So that was something you had to kind of involve in the manuscript as you went on and on. So first it was maybe discovering the love story and the timeline, et cetera, getting it on the page. And then it was, okay, how do I render this so you see that I'm aware of the fact that this is such an age difference and I understand the time and
Right. Because if I hadn't, as a reader, I might have started reading and went, oh no, I can't, I can't
yeah,
even,
yeah.
do not finish. I didn't
So
know.
you had to really think about the reader and the people who didn't know you well and who would maybe be so new to the story, which is what we all have to do is try to express what we want to share in a way that the reader can take in and process and digest, and we do the best we can, and then we don't know for sure how they're going to take it, but we do the
Right.
best we can.
Right.
Yeah. Well, what was it like for you to share the story with your loved ones, your current husband, your children?
Yep, my daughter, who is now 49, she read it in manuscript form and said, "Go for it, Mom." She just recently read it again. She says to me, "Oh, I cried and cried." I went, "Oh, you
Oh.
sweet." My son did not read my novel because he was afraid it was about me. And my son has not read my memoir, although the parts that are about him I ran by him and he's fine with it. My daughter is going to redact the naughty bits for him so he can read so he can read it. My current husband was so cool about it.
Yeah, I got that impression
Yeah,
actually.
he's fine. I mean, one of the things that Bill and I did is we exchanged cassette tapes when we were apart for a year, and I had no way of playing them. My current husband and my son conspired to find a tape deck, one some fancy reel to reel, so I could listen to them. So while I was reading the letters, though, I was getting so involved and so back where I was at
Oh
that point.
yeah.
My husband's name is Henry. I was calling Henry Bill, and he was just fine. He was just like,
He's just
whatever.
so he's very secure.
He
He's
does
very
not
secure.
feel threatened. I mean, this guy is a ghost.
Yeah, and also this was a different part of your life. I mean, you were such a different person then, right?
Right.
Yeah, well, I had this other excerpt I was wondering about you reading. I was particularly interested in having you read it because it has a lot to do with the dynamics between you and your mom and making decisions about what's good for you and your family as an adult. And perhaps you want to set the time and how
Sure.
old the kids are and a little bit maybe about you and your mom.
Okay, so this scene is later in the book. The book is not linear, there's a lot of back and forth. This scene takes place probably about 2 years after we were in our town together. My mother and I had had a very difficult relationship for many years. And there was a lot of estrangement and then attraction kind of thing going on for years. And she, of course, was just horrified by this relationship and did a lot to try to break us apart during the early years. But here I am with my family. I have two children. Obviously, she's not going to succeed in breaking us up. So she lived in California. She has agreed to come to our house, which was in upstate New York in the Hudson Valley, and stay with us for a little while. And this is the first time since we moved there that I had seen her. So okay, it was a few years later, the cusp of winter and spring, and my mother was coming for a visit. It would be the first time she would see the house we'd been living in for the past 4 years. At the time, my sister Beth was living on a nearby farm where she took care of horses. The relationship between my mother and sister was also fraught, but Beth was much more overt in her defiance of our mother's mores. This had led to battles that sometimes turned physical, including the one where Rose, my mother, had had a 15-year-old Beth arrested and remanded to juvenile detention. But that was years in the past, and we all believed they had come to some sort of rapprochement. And because I so rarely saw my mother, I was lulled into some kind of magical thinking that she might no longer be the unpredictable woman who raised me. It had been snowing, but by afternoon a clear, sun-sparkled late winterscape beckoned us outside, so we embarked on a jaunt to a nearby farm. My mother got into the car next to me, and Beth and the kids, who were 7 and 10, climbed into the back seat. We had a sweet time watching the pigs and the cows, and I was feeling proud that I could create this idyllic scene of family normalcy. Surely there was nothing here to warrant my mother's disapproval. But the temperature had dropped during our sojourn, and the wet roads started to turn icy, as did the conversation. I don't remember what my sister said to set our mother off, whether it was some response Rose found offensive or something Beth had initiated. All at once, Rose picked up the dog's chain link leash from the floor of the passenger side of the car, turned in a fury to my sister, and started beating her with it. My instinct to protect my children battled with the need to keep the car on the road. There was no place to pull over. The kids were ducking and mute with terror. Rose was a virago, brandishing the leash and raining blows on my sister. And then she put the leash back where she found it. You heard her. She was disrespectful to me, wasn't she? Rose turned to the boy shaking in the back seat. My boy either hadn't heard the first shot in the volley, or couldn't find his voice, or had wisely decided to stay out of the fray. Maybe a bit of all three. When he refused to take her side, Rose started to scream at him. You're lying. You're a little liar. I was still trying to keep from sliding into a ditch, and I didn't want to endanger us further by escalating my mother's rage. But thankfully, my son did have a guardian angel in his corner. You leave my brother alone. And then Rose had nothing else to say. We pulled into the driveway, and then I started to shake and remembered our doctor's words about Bill's recent health scare, that he was having TIAs, mini strokes. They could lead to a stroke. If anything was going to bring on a stroke, it was the dangerously unpredictable woman sitting next to me. Not for the first time. I chose Bill. After sending the kids upstairs to play, I asked my mother to leave my house. Neither of us spoke on the car ride over to a nearby motel. She got out of the car, and I helped her with her bags. That was our goodbye. She would take a cab to the train station the next morning, and then fly back to LA. I continued to take my mother's phone calls over the years, even though Bill would have to talk me down after each one. It was so hard to exist in the glare of her disappointment in me. But like the neurotic and that old saw about diving into the empty swimming pool time and again, because you still expect that it's going to be full, I kept expecting another mother, the one who was proud of me for the little family I was anchoring, my professional accomplishments, and the loving person I had turned out to be. And she, no doubt, had hoped for a different daughter. But Bill had the wife he had hoped for, and that would have to be enough.
Thank you so much.
Mm-hmm.
I wonder if this marked a lasting change in your relationship with your mother. What happened on the roads after you had to tell her you're not going to stay at my house?
Well, I'll tell you, Ronit, I had so many lasting changes with my mother. There would be a lasting change, and then I would hope would spring eternal, and I would
Yeah.
go back, and then I would get beaten down again. And there would be periods of time when we were mother and daughter. But this, I think, for me was the final straw. And she would call after that. And my daughter, who was 7 at the time, sometimes she would pick up the phone and she would hear my mother's voice and she would just hang up. She wouldn't talk to her. And then finally, after about a year of this, my mother called and Dinah, my daughter, picked up the phone and she talked to her. And I said, what happened? She said, nobody likes her. She has nobody. So I need to.
Wow.
She was being, a little social
Yes.
worker, right? Yeah, there was a lasting change. And we did see each other. Years would go by and then we'd see each other again. And she was getting older. I invited her to my son's bar mitzvah and she caused a scene. And then finally, she was very old and she was not only mentally unstable, but now not with it anymore. And she was in a nursing home in Florida the last few years. And I visit her and she was like a whole different mother. I didn't recognize her, brought her ice cream. She was so loving. The other thing was that she was so confused that she thought that my aunts were her daughters. So I kind of got a pass because they lived down there and they visited her frequently. I got a pass. I didn't have to go.
Yeah, that is really complicated. And I hear you. I think that's really common for a lot of us. And it comes up in memoir a bunch is what we expect someone to be, what we want them to be, and trying to reconcile that with what they really are. And we keep on trying for the one that we envision, right? The fantasy. So,
Of course. Yeah.
yeah, it's really hard not to. And I'm so sorry because it's really hard to have a mom like that.
I,
Really hard.
I do know because I read your memoir and
Yeah, well, right. It's hard. And I sometimes wonder about this generation of women who were really had a hard time mothering. I don't know. I
Yeah,
don't know if it's universal, but thanks for sharing that. I wonder if there's some advice you would like to share with writers who are currently at work on their memoirs.
it's really hard. It's really hard. And it's going to bring up all the feelings, all the good feelings and all the regret feelings and all the guilt feelings. It's going to be all of that is there. So I really urge all of your listeners or watchers to find a group of sister writers, sister memoirists, either in person or online. Some of my closest friends now are people I've never met, but they're writers who I've connected with online. The support that they offer is really, really important. I don't think you can do this alone. The other piece of advice is if you don't have a therapist, find a good therapist because you're going to need to talk about this.
Yes, I agree. Even though, as we always say, writing is not therapy, but it is really good to have sort of a shepherd, pardon my pun,
No, right.
but as
You
you
write
write the
about it,
memoir,
and
yeah.
then it's not the writing, but you need to talk about the feelings that have been evoked.
Yes, because you're dislodging a lot of material and things you may not have looked at before. And also in therapy, you might find some new discoveries you could then put on the page. So it does work really well together.
Right, right.
Yeah. Well, what are a few books you'd like to recommend that informed your writing process?
Okay, so the first one is Melanie Brooks, Telling Hard Stories. She interviews a number of pretty well-known memoirists. I had a difficult story, you had a difficult story. Memoirists, if you don't have a difficult story, you
Write
know,
an autobiography.
right, right. So that was very eye-opening for me because I had written a novel and that was a whole other process. And the other two books that I recommend, which coincidentally deal with mothers, even though I didn't write extensively about my mother. The first was Motherland, Alyssa Altman's book,
Hmm.
and the other one was Fierce Attachments by Vivian
Vivian
Gornick.
Gornick,
And
yeah.
because human relationships are so complex, and I think these two books really are very good examples of how to treat that complexity in writing a memoir.
Yeah, yeah, thank you. I'll put those in the show notes. And I also want to put links to where people can connect with you and get a copy of An Old Man's Darling.
Okay, so my website is Deborah Shepherd Rice, DeborahShepherd Rice, WRITES.com. There's no K in the website. Didn't scan as well. Order the book wherever you buy books.
Great. I will put that in the show notes, those links. And Deborah, what fun to talk with you. Thank you for being my guest and thank you for sharing so generously. It was just really fun.
Thank you, Ronit. I really enjoyed it.
Thank you for listening to Let's Talk Memoir. For more about my story and the project that started me on my memoir-loving path, you can check out my memoir, When She Comes Back, which is available wherever books are sold and as an audiobook that I narrated. For more about this episode and my guest, please visit the links in the show notes. You can also find a complete catalog of Let's Talk Memoir episodes at ronitplank.com/Let's Talk Memoir. Let's Talk Memoir is also on Substack. About once a month, I publish memoir craft advice, additional interviews, and upcoming classes that I'm offering. There's no paywall. If you are a fan of Let's Talk Memoir, please feel free to share it with your friends. And if you feel moved to leave a podcast rating and review, I appreciate it very much. That helps more writers and readers find the show. Thank you so much for being here.